welcome to another episode of Breaking the Box. I'm here with Matt Kloskowski, a good friend of mine, a Sony Artisan of Imagery, and a Photoshop Hall of Famer. Also known as the Photoshop guy. Great guy with a lot of experience in the educational world and for creatives, especially in the Adobe Creative space.
Also known as super sweaty guy right now. So
Right.
I can't seem to stop.
Yeah, that was an intense workout. It's been interesting with the CrossFit Open doing these episodes, getting these intense workouts in to get the show started. So, but yeah, tell us a little more about your story getting into your industry.
It was probably the most unplanned entry into an industry ever, because I went to University of South Florida here in Tampa. I graduated with a marketing degree, which nobody tells you in business school. Marketing means sales. You know, you're doing these marketing plans and all these fun things, and it means you're going to get into sales. But I liked it. I mean, I was selling construction equipment.
Wow.
Working for the Caterpillar company that's local here.
Okay.
And this was back in the 90s. The advertising department got really busy, and I would go out to job sites and we'd have like a special on a backhoe, or we even rented equipment, special 1 week rental, and I didn't have anything physical to give people. And this was before most people had the internet. So I didn't have anything physical to give them, so I acquired a copy of Photoshop. Nice. And started making my own and bringing them the Kinkos and having them printed. So that's how I got into Photoshop. I realized after a couple years I didn't want to be in construction equipment sales, and so I went back to school at night while I was working to get my IT degree.
Yeah, wow.
And I got into software development, so Visual Basic, database development, all that stuff. And a couple years into that, my boss walked over and like, hey, we need some buttons for the website and some graphics. And this was late 90s when that stuff was a lot harder than it is now. So he's like, does anybody know Photoshop? And I'm like, I know a little bit. So I became the guy that like made graphics for the websites.
Wow. Yeah.
So that's how I got into Photoshop. 2001, we had our first child, so I went out and bought a digital, like a Canon Rebel something.
Okay.
My first digital camera, and I'm like, all right, and I was into photography in high school and college. So then I'm like, all right, I can start putting this photography together with Photoshop. And then I just started writing free tutorials. I made a website, and I back when I was at the software company, I would teach classes at night to new hires. So that's how I started teaching. And so all these things started coming together a few years later, and I started submitting tutorials to a company that's actually local, like right down the road from here. And they had a magazine and a website and everything. I started submitting tutorials for their website, and they accepted them. And a few years later, they gave me a call and said, hey, we need somebody full time. And I was just mostly doing coding at the time, and they said, we need somebody to like teach Photoshop and all this stuff, and I'm like, all right, I'll give it a try. So that's how I moved over into that industry, and then from there, this was back in the early 2000s, and there just wasn't. It was before online video, like the video iPod wasn't even out yet. Yeah, the video, like we had one of the first Photoshop podcasts. It was actually audio only. So if you could imagine, we would sit there in an office and do this podcast, and we'd be like, and if you go under the filter menu, you could go down here and click this, and it looks awesome.
Oh man!
But it was audio only.
Right.
The video iPod wasn't even out yet.
Yeah.
And then the video iPod came out, and then we made our first podcast. But there was just so little competition that being at that company in that space at that time skyrocketed, because there just wasn't anybody doing it. And then the barrier to entry was so high, because back then, this video setup right now, back then just didn't exist.
Yeah.
You needed a full video crew and big expensive cameras, so the barrier to entry was a lot higher, so it was only the few really got to play in that space.
Yeah. Very cool. That's very interesting.
No.
And so have you always been a CrossFitter? Like, what's your story getting into this world?
No, I think I'm a lot like a lot of people, where I think people, conquer might be the wrong word, but like proficient. I think a lot of people we do something and we get semi okay at it, and we're like, yeah, I'm on to something else.
Yeah.
And we do something for a while, oh, I'm on to something else. So
because you did something pretty awesome in the Taekwondo world before coming here, right?
I practiced Taekwondo for 7-8 years, something like that, and that was a lot of fun, and I loved it. I had some hip injury problems that made it hard, but the thing that really kind of nudged me away was, so I got my first degree black belt, and they always say training doesn't really start until you get your black belt, and they're absolutely right. Like, that's when it gets really hard. And so you have to wait 2 years for every degree after that. So it took me 2 years to get my second degree. So if you can imagine, like when you hear somebody that says they're a 7th or 8th degree black belt, they did 1
years.
plus 2 plus 3, like they've been in it a long time.
Right.
But you're doing the same material. When you're in your color belt phase and going through all those ranks, you're changing things up every week. But when you're there, like I had to do the same stuff for 2 years straight. And I by no means became super proficient at it, but I had that bright, shiny object syndrome where I'm like, all right, I'm starting to,
Yeah. Do you find that syndrome in the Photoshop world? Like you want to mix things up after a few years?
Yeah. I think naturally, especially in the creative space, everybody gets to that point where even if everybody else hasn't seen what you're doing, you've been doing it a lot. So sometimes I need to mix it up for me, not necessarily for the audience, because a lot of people might not have seen it, but in order to keep me motivated and keep me energetic about it, I need to mix it up.
What was that for you recently? What have you mixed up?
A great example for me recently. So I have moved. 4 years ago I left the company I was at, and I started my own education business. And I've always concentrated a lot on teaching landscape photography, landscape outdoor. And I was never really into wildlife. And a few years ago, I found myself starting to be more interested in wildlife. And I think it also came at a time where I started to be less interested in landscape. And again, not like I had mastered landscape. There are many, many better landscape photographers than me out there. But it had run its course, and I started to feel a little bit like it had become very common to me. It had become very automatic. Like I knew what to go, I knew what to set up, I knew what to do. And wildlife, as I started to dabble into that, became a big challenge. It was this whole new challenge. It was like starting, like you and I started CrossFit pretty close together.
Yeah.
You might have been like a year ahead of me, but like I remember back in the early days
down at the for a while.
You wouldn't know it, but we've been doing this for a while. But I had not mastered anything, but that challenge of something new re-energized me to start to do different things.
Yeah, very cool, very cool. So one thing I admire about you too, I know you do a lot of traveling, but you're always consistent about getting back into the routine of being in the gym. Like it's not like like as soon as you're back, you're pretty much back working out.
I'm not good at. It takes me weeks to get back to where I was. But
But is that something you've always been good at? Is like getting into a routine and.
I think so. I mean, I think fitness in general. I think fitness is, if you don't make it a routine, it's going to feel like it's work and it's something you have to do. And I think the people that are able to really stick with it, no matter what level you're at, it's something you like to do, and it becomes ingrained into your schedule.
Right.
So, you're probably the same way, where you feel like something's missing if you didn't work out that day. And I do like it. I'm not going to say like I love it all the time, but I like it. But sometimes it's part of my day. Like I don't even think about it. Like I know I'm going to, like when I plan tomorrow, if I'm in town, when I plan tomorrow, and if somebody says, hey, can you have a meeting at 1 o'clock? And then I know my son has a swim meet at 5, like I'll instantly start running through the day in my head to think of, can I do that 1 o'clock meeting, or should I tell them to do it in the morning so I can go work out then? Like, I think those things start to become ingrained in. So yeah, I always try to make it a priority just to keep healthy and keep moving.
Good habit of discipline. Do you have other habits of discipline when it comes to Photoshop and your creative space? Are there some things like, that's regularly part of your routine that you include to make sure you're on top of things?
Yeah, I mean, I'm very much a block out all the distractions person. So for me, I sit down in my office, I shut my door. Like, I work out of the house. I have my home office. I do all my recording in my home office, but I shut the door, I shut my phone, I shut my email down, I shut everything down. And I guess in a way I'm able to do it because all of my customers are online customers that buy something from my store. So I don't necessarily have a client calling me in need of something right now. So not everybody's able to shut their phone off and shut their email off, I get it. But for me, if I want to be creative, I have to put myself into that mode. And if I'm getting constant dings every 3 minutes, I'm not going to be in that mode. I know I do my best creative work in the morning, so I try to get up and do some type of, I save the creative stuff for the morning, and I save the grunt work for the afternoon. And when I say grunt work, I mean answering emails, some website maintenance stuff. If I have to make a web page, if I have to make a sales page for a course I'm releasing or something, I try to save that grunt work for later in the afternoon because it's more technical, and I'm better able to do it then.
Yeah. Do you ever have, a creative burnout within your space?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. There's times I sit there and I'm like, I don't know what to do.
What do you do in those moments?
You know what I found the best thing to do? I got two. One's going to sound really weird, so I'll give you the first one that doesn't sound weird. The best thing to do is go to your audience. If you're in any type of role like that where you can burn out, is go to whoever is in need of your services, and what do they want to know? What do they need help with? And that served me very well over the years. Is I go to my audience and I'll do a survey, and I mean, 9.9 times out of 10, I come back with something I hadn't thought of that somebody mentioned in the survey, or it gives me an idea. A lot of times that's really what it happens, is somebody says something and then I can start to build on it and figure out an idea that goes around it. So that's helped a lot. The other thing is something, not everybody can do, because if you don't work from home, it'd be a little bit hard to do this. But sometimes, man, I just do nothing. I'll just sit down, because I'll work quite a bit. I'll work 12 to 14 hours a day quite often. And so if I take a day off and I just sit there, eventually I get so tired of sitting there that I'm motivated to go back to work.
That's good.
And I read that somewhere. It wasn't even anything. It wasn't anything I found on my own. I had read somewhere that somebody said, just do nothing. And if you're the kind of person that likes to do a lot of things, you will get so bored of doing nothing that you'll be energized to go back to work.
That's an interesting thing. I might have to try that one.
So yeah, just if you don't know what to do, just go sit around and watch TV for a day.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Well, thank you for coming on. This has been great. I appreciate you making time to come on.
I'm glad to be here. It's a great idea, I think, especially bringing things that we do in CrossFit.
Yeah,
I think
Has it changed your approach to? Has CrossFit specifically changed your approach to your business? Like the mindset behind it, or?
Do you know? It gives me a lot of ideas. It gives me a lot of. I'm in a content business, and it gives me a lot of content ideas. Like one day I'm out here running, and we're doing a long distance. Our coach programmed in, a mile or a 2 mile run into a workout, and I'm running. And then I start thinking about what she had said, I've been reading up on this and doing this. And then I started thinking, like, you want your coaches to do that. You want them to change it up. You don't want them to do the same thing. You want them constantly innovating themselves, because then they can pass that along to you and pass their learning experiences along to you.
Yeah.
And so it's given me a lot of ideas. I think the concept of constantly varying, I think that applies to any business, right? Like, you know, the biggest challenge in my business is adapting to change.
Right.
It's 10 years ago, you know, 10, 15 years ago, print advertising, just having a podcast got you business. Today, that doesn't work. You know, today, number one, in my industry, print advertising doesn't do anything, but adapting, like Facebook. Facebook is where, like, we spend, you know, a lot of money throughout the year in advertising. And that wasn't really a thing 10 years ago. So it's adapting to these different things, like the workout we just did in there, you know. At the end of the workout, like, there was a certain thing we were supposed to do, and you could do as many reps as you wanted of each one, but you did what you felt comfortable with. And at the end, I knew I didn't feel comfortable in one spot. I felt comfortable in another spot, so I changed it up a little bit and just made it a little bit easier that way. But yeah, I think you know, adapting in there is adapting in business is probably one of the hardest things that anybody in business goes through right now.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. Well, thanks for coming on. It's been great. I'll see you around.
So I wanted to thank Matt for letting me break into his interview with just me. And part of the reason is it might be like the educator, because that's what I do. I realized when he asked me about what keeps me going into fitness and keeps me back in there and how do I do that, I realized I kind of bailed on the question. When I was driving home, it hit me in a better way of what really is. And so I felt it was important to share that, because I'm hoping it can help some people out there. So what keeps me motivated to go in and work out is, I think you got two different types of workouts, right? You got your group fitness, your CrossFits, your Orange Theories, your F45s, and then you've got your Globo gyms, your LA Fitnesses and your Crunch and wherever you're going, the Snap Fitness. And the group fitness is almost like working in an office, right? You go in, there's a coach or you've got a manager telling you what to do. I don't have to think about it. And you've got people helping you do it. And then you've got your Globo gyms and your LA Fitness or whatever, where you better have a plan. Because if you just walk in there without a plan, you're just gonna stand around and you're not gonna do anything. So everybody puts their headphones on. Nobody's gonna talk to you. Nobody's gonna tell you what to do. Everybody puts their heads down and just works. So there's a place for both of them. And I think if I could answer that question over again, I would say, for me, I figured out I was that person that needed the coach and needed the group, right? I need the coach to tell me what to do. I sit in this office all day. I've got my own business. I'm self-employed. I work from home. I sit in this office all day long, and I have to be self-motivating, right? Nobody's gonna make me do anything. So I've got to figure out what to do. When it comes to my workout, I've realized I don't want to think about a thing. Right? I've done enough of that during the day, so get me somewhere where somebody's going to tell me what to do and there's going to be a group around me pushing me to do it. It might be different. Maybe you're working out at an office all day and you can't wait to get out and decompress and just put your headphones on and be alone. But as Matt asked me, what works for me to do that, that's one of the things I figured out about myself. I never get as good of a workout when I go work out alone as I do when I go into that group fitness atmosphere. And so I would say figure that out for anybody out there, is figure out what works better for you. Do you need the group fitness or do you need the solo fitness idea? Because whatever one works better, once you figure that out, I think it's a lot easier to help stay motivated and to keep after it once you know what type of area that you'll fit into.